Reflect what you just
Everyone, stand by for me. It is primary night in the state of Minnesota, and we have a CNN projection. Congresswoman Ilhan Omar will survive a primary challenge. She defeats an opponent that she's already faced in the past. Now, it's notable that since the so-called squad has already lost 2 of its members to primary challenges just this year, Omar has faced a torrent of criticism against her over her outspoken stance on the conflict in Gaza. But she survived this primary, it looks like, by quite a lot. Coming up next for us, our panel, they're back, and they'll give us their nightcaps.
Tonight, the Senate matchup in the battleground state of Wisconsin is set. Trump-backed businessman Eric Hovde has won the state's Republican primary, and he will face 2-term incumbent Democratic Senator Tammy Baldwin in November in a race that is crucial for Democrats if they want to keep control of the Senate. It is also crucial for Democrats who want to keep control of the White House. New polling in Wisconsin shows Kamala Harris leading Donald Trump by 50 to 46%, a 4-point spread that is within the margin of error. Joining me now is Ben Wickler, chair of the Democratic Party of Wisconsin. Ben, it's great to see you. I'm eager to hear what you think of this latest polling, what you attribute it to, and how optimistic you are. So let's just first start with what's going on in the state of Wisconsin that explains this swing.
Well, it's great to be with you, Alex, and everyone tonight. This is Election Day in Wisconsin. So across the state, people have been voting against a GOP power grab with constitutional amendments. They've been voting in primaries in fair maps for our state legislature. We have a chance to flip the state assembly this November and break the Republican supermajority in our state Senate, congressional primaries, and the Senate race, where we now have Eric Hovde, who is a flaming disaster. We'll talk about him in a minute. But the backdrop to all this is a surge of enthusiasm. Democrats feeling like they have a chance to fundamentally vote for their freedoms, vote fearlessly, vote for opportunity for everyone to get ahead, and vote against MAGA and the kind of curse of attacks, abortion bans, undermining democracy that's really afflicted our state ever since Trump won here in 2016 by 0.7 of a percentage point. So those polls reflect Democrats kind of coming off the sidelines, young people getting re-engaged in politics, people who've never volunteered before now signing up to knock on doors at listdems.org. We knocked on tens of thousands of doors over the weekend. And that surge of energy, our job as Democrats, is to keep it going all the way for the next 83 days until the polls close on November 5th.
Do you think tonight would have been in any way different if it was still President Biden at the top of the ticket? I mean, it sounds like you're seeing, for lack of a better term, trickle-down effects, a halo effect, shall we say, from the choice of Harris to be the presumptive nominee, to be the Democratic nominee here.
Wisconsinites saw the impact of President Biden's policies. They could see the bridges being built. They could see the Microsoft AI data center that's being built in Racine County in the same place that Donald Trump promised, this giant Foxconn facility that never materialized, another broken Trump promise. They've seen crime rates come down after they shot up when Trump was president. So we had a path to victory, and it was likely to be very, very close under President Biden. The difference now, I think, is that there's really a clear sense that this is a choice between the future and the past. And Wisconsin's state motto is the word forward. It's a one-word motto, and it embodies the progressive spirit of the state that created Social Security. And Wisconsinite wrote the Medicare and Medicaid Act, the state that created workers' compensation, unemployment insurance, Earth Day. This is the state that believes in moving forward to a future that works for everyone. And I think that's the kind of energy that you feel coursing through the states, from the state legislative races all the way to the presidential race.
When you talk about the working class, right before this segment, we played the sound of former President Trump congratulating Elon Musk on his ability to just shred workers' jobs at the Tesla factory, at Twitter, and fire illegally or criminally liably workers at Tesla. That has resulted in a lawsuit by the UAW. Is that something that Wisconsinites are going to hear about and vote on? I mean, is that the kind of stuff that actually resonates with the very voters Trump needs to win over?
You know, Wisconsin, there's a saying that was heard all around the Capitol when former Governor Scott Walker attacked unions. And that phrase is, union busting is disgusting. It's not something that Wisconsinites agree with. And this is a state that was built by working people and by unions, where union density is finally rising after years of falling, where everyone knows that unions built the middle class and Republicans try to smash them because they want to rip up the economy and give the pieces to billionaires. So when Trump talks about firing all the workers who are striking for better wages and working conditions, they see their family members losing their jobs. And it's something that I think will motivate voters to ensure that we elect a pro-labor, protecting the right to organize, the pro-act administration, which is the Harris-Walz administration. And that will become law and end Wisconsin's right to work policies that are a relic from the Scott Walker era if we win the House, the Senate with Tammy Baldwin, and the presidency, and they pass that bill.
Why is Eric Hovde, in your words, a flaming disaster, Ben?
You know, Will Rogers, the famous comedian and songwriter, had this phrase, "I never met a man I didn't like." Eric Hovde's never met a Wisconsinite he did like. He has said so many things. He said women pay too much attention to what's happening in Hollywood. He said farmers just sit on a tractor. They don't work hard anymore. He said seniors in nursing homes don't have the mental capacity to vote. Single mothers lack morals and ethics. Young people don't have the work ethic that they once did. He said people struggling with their weight need to face consequences and wanted to add extra charges for health insurance. This is not something Wisconsinites want, and it doesn't seem like he really wants them either. Eric Hovde doesn't like you.com has all the citations for all that, by the way.
In case you needed more. Ben Wickler, it's great to see you. Thanks for joining me tonight.
Thanks so much, Alex.
That is our show for this evening. Now it is time for the last word with Ali Velshi in for Lawrence.
Today, Missouri voters learned that abortion will be on the ballot in November, which follows the breaking news in this hour last night that abortion will be on the ballot in Arizona in November. There are now 8 states in which initiatives to protect or expand access to abortion will be on the ballot in this election. Arkansas, Montana, and Nebraska have similar ballot measures waiting to be certified. Donald Trump has said that he thinks abortion is going to be, quote, a very small issue, end quote, in this election. But every time abortion has been on the ballot, voters have turned out, even in red states, to protect reproductive rights. Abortion rights is on the ballot in a different way tonight in Minnesota, where NBC News predicts that our next guest, Dr. Kelly Morrison, a practicing OBGYN for over 20 years, has won the primary to become the Democratic nominee for Minnesota's 3rd congressional district. There are currently 0 OBGYNs in Congress who support reproductive rights. Dr. Morrison told NBC News she's hoping to bring her experience working with patients to enact laws that ensure that women get the care they need. Quote, OBGYNs and other care providers see firsthand what abortion bans and restrictions do to people's health. When I talk to my colleagues in states that have enacted these bans and restrictions, it's really terrifying what's happening in those areas, end quote. We're hearing more of those terrifying stories of what pregnant women seeking emergency medical care are struggling with in a post-Dobbs America, thanks to Donald Trump and Republican abortion bans. The Associated Press reports, quote, more than 100 pregnant women in medical distress who sought help from emergency rooms were turned away or negligently treated since 2022. 2 women were left to miscarry in public restrooms. At least 4 other women with ectopic pregnancies had trouble getting treatment, including one in California who needed a blood transfusion after she sat for 9 hours in an emergency waiting room, end quote. Kylie Thurman is one of 2 Texas women who filed complaints after that state refused to provide an emergency abortion to end her ectopic pregnancy. She nearly died after her fallopian tube ruptured and needed surgery to remove it, severely limiting her future fertility. Here's what she told NBC News.
I had to fight like hell to get my care. And even with all the fight that I have, I still didn't get it fast enough. I want to have kids, and I wanted to keep my fallopian tube. But now it's gone, which is a pretty big adjustment. Like, not only physically, I'm missing a reproductive organ, but yeah, psychologically, a piece of my womanhood was taken. There's pieces of me that just feel violated.
Joining us now is Dr. Kelly Morrison, Democratic congressional nominee running to represent Minnesota's 3rd district. Congratulations to you on your victory. I've been looking to talk to you because you shouldn't be the unusual creature that you are. The idea that you will be, you could be one of the only pro-reproductive rights OBGYNs in Congress. It's 2024, and we have 500 people in Congress. How can this possibly be?
Well, thank you for having me tonight, Allie. One of the main reasons I ran for office in the first place was in the wake of Trump's election in 2018. You know, we in the OBGYN community knew what that meant for reproductive rights in our country. We knew, and he ran on, it's one of the few campaign promises that he kept, that he would appoint justices to the Supreme Court with the intent of overturning Roe versus Wade, and that's exactly what they did. So in the wake of the Dobbs decision, we have watched a maternal health crisis unfold across our country. It's devastating to see what's happening. There are bans or restrictions in nearly half of our states, and we're seeing rising maternal mortality and infant mortality rates in the United States in the year 2024. And it's because of these bans and restrictions. And it is because of this that it's so important that we have voices in Congress of people who have actually taken care of patients, who understand the science and the nuance of these issues, particularly in this year, in this time, when reproductive rights have been rolled back and people's lives are at risk.
You talk about maternal mortality and infant mortality rates rising, and there are people who are studying this and are able to track the correlation between the end of Dobbs and that. But we already, because of our inequalities in healthcare in the United States, have higher maternal mortality and infant mortality rates than pretty much everybody in the entire developed world. We were already in a problem, in trouble on that front. But one thing that you bring to the conversation, if you're in Congress, is the idea that the laws as applied don't work. The exceptions as applied don't work. That's why we've got people like Kelly Thurman, who we just heard about, or Amanda Zarowski. These are people who were not looking to have reproductive organs damaged or removed, but the law doesn't protect them.
Those stories are absolutely heartbreaking, and I'm hearing from my colleagues across the country similar stories. You know, here in Minnesota, as the only OBGYN in the Minnesota legislature, I was really proud to help lead the effort to protect and expand access to reproductive health care, including abortion care here in Minnesota. And our Governor, Tim Walz, who is now, as you know, Vice President Harris's running mate, signed those bills into law. The problem is, even in places like Minnesota, we will be at risk if Donald Trump wins, if the Republicans take control of the House and the Senate. We will have national abortion bans, and these problems will only get worse. You know, sometimes you hear about laws that include exceptions for the life of the mother, which maybe sound good to some people. The problem is, there is so much nuance in these cases. You cannot legislate exceptions like this. Women who are pregnant can tolerate a lot of insult. They can tolerate a lot of blood loss until they can't. And so people can get to a point where they seem like they're okay, and when they deteriorate rapidly. And so putting all of the different nuances and possibilities and clinical scenarios into law is just not possible. These decisions need to be left between a patient and their healthcare provider, and that's why we need voices in Congress who can stand up to this repressive legislation so that we can pass national abortion protections.
Something interesting, we were just talking about how Missouri now has an abortion question on the ballot in November. Arizona last night, we learned will have one. We've had several already, 7 or something like that. There are now 8 states on the ballot for November, probably going to end up with 11 in the end. This drives people out, even people who would not perhaps consider an abortion for themselves. That's not the point here, right? Your point is much more valid, and that is, this is a medical decision and a personal decision to be taken by a woman and her doctor. You take that freedom away, then suddenly you and I have different rights in this country.
That's right. You know, this really isn't a partisan issue. This is another example where elected officials do not reflect the will of the people. Republican women and Democratic women and independent women can all get pregnant and can all have pregnancy complications. As long as people are able to get pregnant, there will be reasons that they either need or want to end a pregnancy, and it's no one's business but their own. So we need to ensure that we go forward to a time where women can live full reproductive lives, where they're making their own decisions, Let's support women and families. Let's have pro-life policies like paid family and medical leave, like insurance for new moms and their babies, like affordable child care. Let's focus on that rather than removing rights from women and their families.
Dr. Kelly Morrison, thank you for joining us tonight. Again, congratulations on your primary victory tonight. We look forward to talking to you many times in the future.
Thank you so much.
Coming up, it's also primary night in Wisconsin, where our next guest will be the Senate Democratic nominee to run for a third term, this time against the Trump-backed Republican Eric Hovde, who also happens to be one of Orange County, California's most influential people. The incumbent Senator Tammy Baldwin joins us after the break. It is election night in Wisconsin, and tonight made it official. Senator Tammy Baldwin is once again officially the Democratic nominee after running unopposed in the primary. Today also confirmed what the primary polls have been showing us on the Republican side. In the general election, Senator Baldwin will face Republican Eric Hovde, the guy on the left, a multimillionaire banker who made much of his fortune in Orange County, California. It's a tough election season to be a multimillionaire banker in a country where, as we've discussed tonight, organized labor is having a real comeback. In Wisconsin, union power was decimated, you may remember, under this guy, the Republican Governor Scott Walker, who signed a law that was kneecapping to unions in March of 2015. Union membership in Wisconsin reached an all-time low in 2022. Look at that drop, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. It was down to 7.1% from an all-time high in 1989, where nearly 21% of Wisconsin workers were union members. But last year in Wisconsin, there was an increase in union membership, up to 7.4%, and that's the first time that number's gone up in over a decade. Here's more of what the Democratic vice presidential candidate told union members in Los Angeles earlier today.
Every single chance they've gotten, they've waged war on workers and their ability to collectively bargain to take that away from them. All we're asking for is better wages, better benefits, better lives, and dignity in the work that we do. There's a great bill in Congress. Should be the easiest vote you've ever taken, the PRO Act. Make it easier to form a union and bargain. Allow people to have the freedom to make a choice. Allow them to be able to do that.
For her part, Senator Baldwin also responded to another campaign issue this week, some past comments by J.D. Vance. Take a look at this, sharing this photo with her cats online with the caption, "This childless cat lady is a U.S. Senator." Joining me now is Tammy Baldwin, Democrat of Wisconsin, who's running for her third term in the United States Senate. Senator, good to see you. You and I have been talking for years, and we always enjoy having you on. But that one floored me. When I saw that on Twitter the day you posted it, I thought that was pretty. As a brat, as the kids say, that was impressive.
Thank you. I found J.D. Vance's comments offensive. Even for cat lovers. But I have to say that, he said some really weird things about families. He said parents of children should maybe have more votes. I mean, some of this stuff is unbelievable. Yeah. What I want to say is I value families of all types. Whether you want to be single or you're in a marriage, whether you're a single parent or choose not to have children, we value all families. And the type of insults that we've seen hurled from J.D. Vance and others, including my opponent, against folks is really deeply disturbing. We need representatives and senators fighting for the working people of our states. And there's really no place for disparaging and insulting huge numbers of folks.
And over the decades, there's been a thing where one could make arguments about which party in a particular election has a stronger platform as it relates to working people. That's just not the case in 2024. It's just not the case. That conversation with Elon Musk and Donald Trump last night sort of tells you everything you need to know, although there's a lot more stuff in Project 2025 and in things that Donald Trump actually did when he was president, that if you are a working American, whether you're unionized or not, but if you feel like you are, that wages should be fair for working Americans and that people should have a right to organize, you don't have two choices in November.
Exactly. I just came from a meeting with Green Bay area educators getting ready for the start of the new school year. but many of them had been around for long enough to remember Scott Walker and the actions that he took that you just talked about, stripping public sector workers of their union rights. You know, I think about the struggles that teachers have gone through, but I also think about this election boiling down to whose side you're on and being about rights and freedoms, the right to organize, the right to access the ballot box, the right to choose. All of those things are on the line, and there couldn't be a starker contrast between Democrats and Republicans or between me and my opponent. On the issue of reproductive choice, my opponent, Eric Hovde, cheered the reversal of Roe versus Wade and the jobs decision. I champion in the Senate the Women's Health Protection Act, which would codify Roe versus Wade, would put it on the federal books. And there couldn't be a greater difference in my race against my opponent, but also between Democrats and Republicans across this country. These things, these rights and freedoms are all at stake on November 5th.
And we're talking about freedoms, and you mentioned some of them, and there's the freedom to read the books you want to read, and there's your reproductive freedoms.
Yes.
It's quite, it's a fairly basic thing. It's not a hard concept. And looking at the polls, the New York Times Siena poll of the Wisconsin Senate rate, you're running fairly well against Eric Hovde. We can't take anything for granted, though. You got 84 days or something until the election. And these things have to be made clear to people. This is not actually your generalized view on abortion. This is your view of what freedoms people should have in this country. You listed a bunch of them, but it's a choice between freedom or restriction, which is rich coming from a Republican Party that talks about smaller government.
Right. You know, anyone who celebrates the overturning of Roe versus Wade owns the chaos that created, and the difference between, like, Wisconsin with our criminal abortion ban passed in 1849, Texas with a 6-week ban, Idaho trying to penalize travel across state lines to access basic health care. I mean, you have to own that. But I think you're so right, and on so many issues, we have to elevate the contrast. You just cited a poll, but Wisconsin's the battleground state. Our 2016 presidential election was decided by less than a percentage point when Trump won. Same true in 2020 when Biden won by less than a percentage point. This is another presidential year. In Wisconsin, we take that very seriously. And as you mentioned, my opponent and I could not be more different on the issues, on the issue of abortion, but on the issue of the Affordable Care Act. He wants to repeal it. I wrote the provision that allows young people to stay on their parents' health insurance until they're 26. On Social Security and Medicare, he wants to increase the retirement age and cut those programs. I want to protect them. But as you mentioned, my opponent is a self-financer and has already written $14 million of his own wealth into his campaign. He's trying to buy this Senate seat. I can't self-finance, so if you want to help, go to TammyBaldwin.com and help me pitch in.
Let me ask you about something else, because we can go through Project 2025 and keep on finding all the differences. One of them is about gay Americans and their rights, right? And a lot of people live in Wisconsin or California or New York or Massachusetts aren't really clear whether this is a threat to them. But it is in Project 2025, because Project 2025 says that a family is a man, an unrelated woman, and their children. And that's it. The interesting thing about Tim Walz is from a long time ago, he has had a view as a teacher that, in fact, he was involved with the Students Gay Straight Alliance when he was a teacher. Again, they're very clear. If you're a gay American, you have to pay close attention to this election.
You really do. And just as we thought, I think so many people thought that Roe versus Wade as long-term precedent was the law of the land and we didn't have to worry. And then we saw this Supreme Court reverse it and basically say in its ruling that there's no longer a fundamental right to privacy, a constitutional right to privacy anymore in the United States. And I think about America as a place where we try to extend rights and freedoms over time, not see this retreat. We have to worry about the Supreme Court and what it might do if these sort of questions come up, because there are now extreme members of that court. But we also have to worry about what's happening at the local level, banning of books with maybe a gay theme, or changing the curricula to exclude things that they don't want young people to see. These are things that are happening in the United States at this time, and again, all at stake on the ballot on November 5th.
Senator Tammy Baldwin, good to see you. Thank you for being with us. Congratulations on the officialness of your primary nomination. Good to see you. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Coming up, Elon Musk's social media company X is spreading misinformation to voters ahead of the November election. Our next guest is looking to put a stop to it. Minnesota Secretary of State Steve Simon joins us next. Got a lot of breaking news out of the Midwest tonight. The NBC News Decision Desk projects that Minnesota Congresswoman Ilhan Omar has won the Democratic primary for Minnesota's 5th district, 56% to 43% for her challenger, Don Samuels.
On the other side of using your celebrity, actor Mark Ruffalo campaigning for Ilhan Omar, except he put his foot directly in his mouth. Our What Were They Thinking segment is next. Now time for our What Were They Thinking segment with squad member Ilhan Omar's primary results coming in tonight. There was one celebrity endorsement she maybe could have done without. Actor Mark Ruffalo supported her run for re-election, but he's an actor, not a politico, so maybe he shouldn't be expected to actually know her politics and policies, particularly how radical she is. He sent this out on X. Thanks to Ilhan Omar, we'll see 100,000 new green jobs over the next decade. That's real leadership on climate action. Join us turning out to vote for Ilhan Omar and keep a true progressive in Congress. What Mark Ruffalo apparently didn't know or realize is that Representative Omar voted against federal money that could have been used for infrastructure improvements in her district. So those alleged 100,000 jobs were in spite of her, not thanks to her. Ruffalo was quickly fact-checked. A community note was posted saying Ilhan Omar voted against the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, which brought those green jobs to Minnesota. Omar's opponent, Don Samuels, jumped at the chance to use the fumble. He said another satisfied constituent, oh wait, no, a celebrity who doesn't live here, nor is from here. Also, unfortunately, Representative Omar voted against President Biden's Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, which has created over 38,300 good-paying union jobs and made a historic investment in combating climate change. So, regardless of the outcome tonight, it just leaves us asking, what was he thinking? That does it for us tonight. Thanks for watching. Banfield starts now.
All right, welcome back to Prime News. There are some key primary elections happening tonight. We wanted to update you on those. Let's head over to Washington, D.C., where our congressional correspondent, Kilmeny Ducart, joins us with the latest on these key races. Hey, Kilmeny.
Good evening, John. Great to be with you. Voters in Vermont, Connecticut, Wisconsin, and Minnesota all heading to the polls today for their state's primaries. In Minnesota's 5th congressional district, where polls close at 9 p.m. Eastern, Democrat incumbent squad member Ilhan Omar takes on Don Samuels in what's expected to be a tight race. Samuels ran against Omar in 2022 and lost by a slim 2,500 votes. Although Congresswoman Omar has fundraised and outperformed Samuels in the polls heading into primary day, interest and speculation has been focused on how many Republican voters would cast a ballot today for Omar's opponent. It's an open primary system in the Gopher state, so the incumbent Congresswoman has been frequently critical of Israel and their war against Hamas and labeled anti-Semitic by her critics. We've seen two other outspoken critics of Israel lose their primaries this election cycle, squad members New York's Jamal Bowman and, of course, Missouri's Cori Bush. And AIPAC, we know, has been involved in many of these races. Those two previous races as well as well as some advertising from a lot of these pro-Israel groups. So this will be one of their main challengers tonight as far as that concern. Again, polls close for that race at the top of the hour. And of course, stick with Newsmax for those latest results throughout the evening. John?
All right, Kilmeny, great to see you. Thank you. But there's a way that people can send a message now to these radical politicians, and that is vote. Today is primary day in Minnesota, and it's an open primary, which means anyone can go out there and vote out radicals like Ilhan Omar, an ally of Tim Walz. And the American focus can be on Kamala Harris and Tim Walz later when they are up for election.
Good evening. I'm Kilmeny Dugard. Voters in Vermont, Connecticut, Wisconsin, and Minnesota all heading to the polls today for their state primaries. All eyes are on Minnesota's 5th congressional district, where we begin tonight. Polls are now closed in the Gopher State. Democrat squad member incumbent Congresswoman Ilhan Omar taking on Don Samuels. Still waiting for results to trickle in. Omar fighting not to become the 3rd member of the squad to lose her seat in this election season. And after that is, of course, after New York's Jamal Bowman and Missouri's Cori Bush both lost their primaries in large part to money flowing to their opponents from the pro-Israel lobby AIPAC. AIPAC reportedly opting to remain on the sidelines in terms of funding for Omar's race in Minnesota. Ilhan Omar defeated Samuels in 2022's primary race by just over 2,000 votes. And polls are now closed in Wisconsin. Newsmax can project that Trump-backed Republican Senate candidate Eric Hovde will win his primary. Hovde will take on incumbent Democrat Senator Tammy Baldwin in November. Stick with Newsmax for the latest results throughout the evening. I'm Kilmeny Dugard.